Welcome, everybody. My name is Anne Siskos, and I will be your host today for our IHN guest speaker series. I am a student counselor at IHN and also a program advisor. So many of you here today are practitioners and alumni, but for those who are just getting to know us, at IHN, we train people to become practice-ready, holistic nutrition practitioners into 12 to 24 months, so they're not just certified, but ready to work with real clients. Welcome to all of you today. Our format will be as follows. First, I will introduce Kate McDowell. Then she'll do her presentation, which is close to an hour or so. We'll have a Q&A after that. If you feel you want to put your questions in the Q&A box as the presentation is going along, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can do it at the end. And attendees will be receiving a resource from Kate. We're going to be sending that out when we send the replay of the video. And it's a concise, practitioner-friendly screening and reflection guide designed specifically for holistic nutrition practitioners. It's a resource to help identify common non-nutritional factors that block progress in MS and autoimmune clients, even when compliance is strong. It includes clear signs what to watch for, scope-appropriate observation prompts, and guidance on when simplifying, pausing, or referring out, which may support better outcomes. Now, about Kate. I'm very pleased today to introduce to you Kate McDowell with the topic Enhancing Nutrition's Impact in Multiple Sclerosis and Autoimmune Support. Kate is a certified nutrition practitioner and the founder of Aligned Natural Health. She graduated from the Institute of Holistic Nutrition in 2020 and holds certifications as a hypnosis and NLP practitioner. Kate supports women living with MS and autoimmune conditions who have explored both conventional and holistic approaches, including nutrition, but without experiencing lasting results. There's a lot more about Kate and her personal journey with MS, and she will be telling us a bit about that throughout her presentation and also her work as a practitioner. So Kate, a very big welcome to you. I now pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I want to start by saying how grateful I am to be here. Being a part of the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, it played a huge role in changing the direction of my own life. So coming back here to share this way feels so incredibly meaningful to me. And for me, nutrition is something I don't just casually believe in. It's something I have lived. It's something I've leaned on. And it's something I see foundational in every sense of that word. So today is about understanding something I've found that nutrition can work even better using. And that's along the lines of, yes, we talk about the physical when it comes to nutritional, but there's a lot of mindset related stuff as well. So if I can get my tech to work. Okay. So for many people with MS or autoimmune conditions, nutrition is often the first place where they finally feel a sense of control. And if you've worked with this population at all, and definitely long enough, you've seen this moment. They come in overwhelmed. They've seen multiple doctors. They've had labs run. They've been told things are normal, or that they're expected to experience this disease progressing as life goes on. That was definitely my experience. I was diagnosed, I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but my MS diagnosis was just over 20 years ago. It was 21 years ago now. It was March of 2005. And I remember that feeling of feeling dismissed, of feeling confused, and often quietly pretty scared about what the future meant for me, what was possible. And when these clients come and sit across from you, for the first time, this is often when somebody explains inflammation or blood sugar or gut integrity or even nutrient depletion. And so not in rushed appointments, not in just 5 minutes, but in a way that actually makes sense to them. And in this experience, you can often see their nervous system relax just a little bit, which is a pretty beautiful place to be as a practitioner. You can see their shoulders drop a little because now they know that there's something that they can do. Nutrition for me was cool because it was the first time I felt there was something tangible, something I could do. It's actionable, it's not abstract, and it's not, well, just wait and see. And that alone can be really powerful. Then they start making changes as clients. They remove some foods that clearly aggravate their symptoms. They prioritize protein. They start to stabilize blood sugar. And they support digestion. And very often, especially early on, they start noticing real life improvements. They make it through the afternoon without crashing. They're not relying on caffeine just to function. Their digestion feels calmer and more predictable. They find they can think more clearly. They fall asleep easier and wake up feeling more rested. And even their mood feels steadier and less volatile. That early momentum matters more than we sometimes realize because it does two important things at the same time. It improves physiology, but it also builds belief. And it gives a client this new internal message. My body is responding. I'm not broken, and I can influence this. For MS and autoimmune clients, that shift is enormous. Many have been told some version of, well, this is just progressive, or you'll need to manage this forever, or even there's nothing you can really do. I definitely have lived all of these things, and having this understanding that I can make a difference, I can create change in my own life and my own health, in my own future, was huge for me. And seeing this with clients is always really rewarding because finally they feel like they have a choice, they have a say. It's like watching a television show where you're not happy with the show. The graphics are really boring or distracting. You don't like the plot. Maybe some of the characters are annoying. And we can sit there and we can complain about these things, or we can focus on how much we don't like it, or we can realize that the remote control is sitting on the table in front of us. And this is what nutrition is so powerful in being able to allow people to start doing. Going from that place of feeling like there's nothing you can really do to understanding that they do have a say. Nutrition gives them participation. It moves them from passive recipient of care to active participant in their own process. And I want to name something clearly here. That early improvement is not placebo. It's biochemical. When blood sugar stabilizes, cortisol regulation often improves. When protein intake increases, neurotransmitter building blocks increase. When inflammation foods are reduced, inflammatory signals can decrease. And when digestion improves, absorption improves. Inputs matter when it comes to overall health, but especially in this population. You are changing the raw materials that are available to the system. This is often the phase where we feel the most confident as practitioners because this is what we were trained in. We can assess intake, we can map pathways, we can connect dots. And for many people, this level of work creates meaningful, lasting change. But if you've practiced long enough, you've also seen the next pattern that can happen. That initial momentum can plateau. Not for everyone, but often enough to notice. And when it does, most of us do what we were trained to do. We take a look at macros. Maybe we add supplements, or we rotate protocols, Sometimes we remove more foods, or we go deeper into detox, or we run more tests, and sometimes that helps, and sometimes it doesn't. So here's the bridge that I want you to hold. Nutrition is the foundation, always. The question is not whether nutrition matters. The question is what influences how far that momentum can go. And by the end of today, you'll have a simple way to recognize when a plateau is primarily an input problem and when it's a state problem. Plus a few practical next steps you can use without becoming a therapist. Because once you see this, you can stop chasing that perfect protocol and start working with the whole system. That's the doorway to the next level with many clients. So if you've worked with enough MS or autoimmune clients, you start noticing the second pattern. Often after early momentum, something shifts. It's not always dramatic. It's not sudden. It's often gradual, but progress slows. Symptoms plateau or improvement becomes inconsistent. And this is often where practitioners, this was myself in the past too, can quietly start to doubt ourselves. You don't usually say it out loud, but I remember saying to myself, am I just missing something? Is my protocol wrong? Do I maybe need more training? Do I need different supplements here? Or am I not good enough at this yet? And at the same time, clients often have their own internal dialogue as well. This can be things like, I must not be doing this right, or my body just doesn't respond, or maybe this really is just as good as it gets. And neither of those stories is helpful, and most of the time, neither of them are true. Because here's what is important to recognize with MS and autoimmune clients is that many of these clients are still doing the nutrition. They're compliant, they're trying, they have not gone back to their old patterns, and they're not giving up. So if inputs have not dramatically changed, but outputs have, then that tells us something important. All right. So when I said before, like sometimes the inputs, if they have not dramatically changed, but the outputs have, that tells us something really important. And it often suggests that the issue itself may not be with the food itself. It can be the internal context in which the food is being received by the body. And so most of our education trains us to look at what someone is eating or what they're deficient in or what they're reactive to or what maybe they're overloaded with, which are all really important things to take a look at and to focus on. But few programs spend time asking, what state is this body in most of the day, this person that you're working with? Is it in a state of relative safety? Or is it in a state of ongoing low-grade threat? And from my experience with my health journey, there was that state of ongoing low-grade threat all of the time from a very young age. And these two states process nutrients very differently. Not metaphorically, but physiologically. When the body perceives threat, digestion changes. Blood flow shifts away from the gut. Stomach acid can decrease. Even enzyme output can change, and motility can become sluggish or erratic, and inflammatory signals rise. So you can be giving an MS or an autoimmune client beautiful nutrition, but their body may not be in a position to fully utilize it. Not because they're broken. Not because you failed. But because not because nutrition doesn't matter, but because physiologically they're in a state-dependent position where safety is more important. This is also the moment where well-meaning care can accidentally add pressure. More supplements, more protocols, more eliminations, or more rules. And so sometimes that does help, but sometimes it adds another layer of stress. Now, you have a client who is already trying hard, already worried about their health, already monitoring their body closely, and now also managing an increasingly complex regimen. So even when intentions are good, pressure can push the system further into threat. So the inquiry shifts. Instead of immediately asking, what else can I do? We start asking, what can I simplify? What can I stabilize? What might reduce pressure? Or what helps this body feel safer while it's rebuilding capacity? Sometimes the next step is not more. Sometimes it's gentler, slower, or supportive in a different way. This does not mean nutrition stops being the foundation. It means nutrition is a part of a bigger picture. And that picture can include things like internal environment, like nervous system tone, emotional load, even belief patterns and life context. And when you start seeing MS and autoimmune clients through this lens, plateaus stop feeling like failures. They start feeling like information. And information is something we can work with. This is where your power as a practitioner expands, not because you know everything, but because you're willing to look at the whole system, the person as a whole, and that becomes the doorway to the next level. So the question is, does this body feel safe enough to change? Safety first, then adaptation. And if I had to choose one place to start, it's still 100% is nutrition all the way. When I'm working with a client, with any client, it will always be nutrition. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my backstory when it comes to MS. I was diagnosed at 22 years old, so in 2005, and I was raised in a belief system where medicine was the solution. Not one option, not one piece of the puzzle, it was the solution, the only thing. If something was wrong, you went to a doctor. If you didn't feel well, you waited for a diagnosis. If you got a diagnosis, you followed the protocol. That was what the responsible people did. That was being good, or what being compliant looked like. And it wasn't really a conversation about prevention. There wasn't a conversation about root cause. There definitely wasn't a conversation about the mind or the nervous system. And so in my world growing up, health was something to be handled by professionals. It wasn't something you participated in. It wasn't something you even co-created. So when I was diagnosed with MS, I was still a kid. And so I did what I was brought up to believe and what I was told to do. I walked into that doctor's office already carrying that belief system. I didn't go in thinking, I wonder what else I can explore. I went in thinking, tell me what's wrong and tell me what to do. I remember that moment sitting in the ER in Kitchener, Ontario, and a doctor that I had never seen before came walking in. I'd already been there for 3 days. They'd run all kinds of tests. I kept hearing murmurs of stroke, 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 and I thought, that's crazy. I'm young. I'm healthy. What's going on here? This doctor I've never met before comes walking in and says, hi, my name is Dr. I don't even remember, and I'm diagnosing you with multiple sclerosis. I had no idea what that was. I hadn't Googled it. It was 2005. I don't even know if Google existed yet. I didn't know the statistics. I didn't know the long-term projections. I just knew it sounded serious, and I knew it sounded permanent. I remember sitting there while the doctor explained what MS is and that it's considered progressive, unpredictable, something I would need to manage for the rest of my life. There was no reversing it. There was no improving it. There was not even really anything to question or to talk about. Just manage. I remember nodding. I nodded not because I felt empowered, but because I didn't know there was another option. That conversation felt like someone took my future and quietly put borders around it. It wasn't dramatic. No one said your life is over, but the message underneath it was clear. This is your box now. And inside this box were a lot of implied losses, like the life I thought I was going to have, or the energy I assumed I'd always have, the ease I took for granted, or the body I trusted without thinking. It wasn't just fear of symptoms, it was grief. Grief for a version of myself I hadn't even lived yet, and for a future I suddenly wasn't sure I was allowed to even imagine. And here's what's important. I didn't walk out of that office angry. I didn't walk out questioning the system. I didn't walk out thinking doctors were wrong. I walked out believing what I'd been told, because that belief system was familiar, because it matched how I was raised, and because everyone around me believed it too. And we're seeing a lot of this kind of mentality shifting now, which is really cool. A lot of people are starting to notice that there are other things we can do. We have other options and we have other say when it comes to our own health and well-being. So what I did made sense in that 2005 world, inside that worldview. I took the medications, I went to the appointments, I waited for answers and for something to come from outside of me that would rescue me. But underneath it all, something very quietly happened. A small question appeared, almost like a whisper. Is this the only path? And it wasn't in a they're wrong way. It was more in a curious way. Like, is there really nothing else I can do to support? Is there really nothing I can influence? And is there no other way that I can participate? And that question didn't change my life overnight, but it didn't make me throw away the medication, but it created a little crack. And that crack mattered because before that moment, I didn't even know other rooms existed. I thought there was just one hallway, one direction, one authority. And that question didn't give me answers, but it gave me permission. Permission to look, to learn, and to eventually discover that health is not a single lane road. It's not just one profession, one modality, or one philosophy. It's an ecosystem. And that realization is what eventually led me to nutrition. For about 7 years after that, I followed the traditional model. I did what I was told. I took the medications. I went to the appointments. But over time, my life started to get smaller, more fatigue, less resilience, and fewer spontaneous yeses. And eventually I reached a point where I couldn't pretend I was okay with this is as good as it gets anymore. I didn't know what the alternative was. What I had was willingness. Willingness to look beyond the narrow lens I'd been given. And what shifted wasn't my diet at first, it was my perspective. As I started to change how I ate and replenish what my body had likely been missing, things started to shift. My fatigue lifted, my brain fog improved, my flare-ups became less frequent and less intense, but just as important, my relationship with my body started to change. I stopped seeing it as broken. I stopped seeing it as something I needed to fight. I stopped really resisting everything that it was trying to tell me because I started recognizing that it was actually communicating through symptoms. That is the opening that led me to IHN. Nutrition became my first empowered choice, not as a diet, not as a set of rules, but as education, understanding inflammation, understanding blood sugar, understanding gut health, understanding nutrient deficiencies, and understanding how food is information for our bodies. One of the most important realizations that I had in my own journey, and later again and again with clients, is this: nutrition doesn't fail. That sentence can feel a little bit questionable at first, but because of course we refine our protocols, we individualize, we understand that not every approach works for every person, but what I mean is deeper. If the body is receiving nutrients, but the expected changes aren't happening, it doesn't automatically mean nutrition is wrong. It doesn't automatically mean you chose the wrong supplement. It doesn't automatically mean that the client is not compliant. It means something is influencing how those nutrients are being processed, absorbed, and utilized by the body. And that's a very different problem to solve. Most of us were trained to troubleshoot at the level of input. So maybe it's more vitamin C, or a different magnesium, or higher protein, lower carbs, different fat ratios. There's lots of things that we can look at from the input side of things, and they're all really valid tools and good things to address. But there's another layer under the input, and that's the question of capacity. Can this body currently receive what I'm giving it? Not in theory, not on paper, but in reality. Because you can hand someone the most beautiful blueprint in the world, but if the construction site is flooded, nothing gets built. It doesn't mean the blueprint is wrong. It means the conditions need attention. And that's where I started reframing plateaus. Instead of asking, what am I missing? I started asking, what might be limiting the body's capacity right now? And that one question changes everything. Sometimes the answer was still nutritional: poor digestion, low stomach acid, enzyme insufficiency, severe depletion. But sometimes the answer lived in physiology that nutrition alone wasn't addressing. So that could be things like chronic stress or emotional load or long time over responsibility or never trusting resting, never truly resting. What about always pushing? A body that has spent years in go mode, when a system has lived in that state long enough, it adapts. It becomes very efficient at surviving, but not very efficient at repairing. A body that is in chronic fight or flight mode is not doing the healing that it was designed to do. Survival and repair are not the same state, and they require different internal conditions. Nutrition does support repair, but repair also requires a certain nervous system tone. And this is why I say nutrition doesn't fail, because when the conditions are right, nutrition works beautifully every time. And we see it. You've seen it. Clients suddenly start responding, symptoms shift, energy returns, things that were stuck begin to move again. And that's with the same food, the same supplements, and a different response. That tells us something important, though. The variable wasn't the nutrition, the variable was the environment. And once I truly understood this, it removed so much pressure. Pressure for me, pressure for my clients, and even pressure for the work that we're doing, because plateaus stop feeling like personal failures. They become signals, information, and a message that says this system needs support at a different layer now. And that alone is empowering, because it gives us options, not fewer. It also protects us from the swings of extremes. We don't abandon what works. We don't suddenly decide that everything is just emotional. We keep nutrition as the foundation, and we add context. We zoom out. We ask better questions. That's real clinical maturity. Being able to hold nutrition is essential, and nutrition is part of a larger system, and know that both are true. And when you hold both, your work gets more effective, your clients feel more seen, and you stop carrying the weight of thinking you have to have the perfect protocol for every person. You start working with physiology instead of fighting it. And that's the core truth. All right. So once I started to truly understand that the nervous system state influences autoimmune behavior or immune behavior in general, and immune behavior influences how the body responds to nutrition, the next layer started to make sense was belief. Not belief in a philosophical way, but not belief in a positive thinking way, but belief as the internal story a nervous system gets organized around. For me, growing up, and my experience was that, like, when there was stress, that story that I had there from an experience that happened when I was 4 years old was that stress was a time where I needed to set my needs aside to make sure that everyone else was safe. Now, when it comes to MS and autoimmune, I see patterns like this happen over and over again with different clients. It's maybe the kid that had to come home and take care of themselves after school, or the child that took care of their siblings, or maybe had to take care of a parent. This is often where it shows up, where there's a lot of pressure put on the system young. And so that belief from a young age is that when there is stress, I need to put my needs aside. So then from the rest of life, that's a response that just keeps happening and coming back, because we always respond. The way we respond to one thing is the way we respond to everything. And so the class that really stood out for me the most when it comes to IHN, I was a very science-minded kid. And so I thought that the sciences would be really, really impactful and important for me. But the class that stood out the most was psychology of disease, which is something I didn't expect at all. But when we started talking about Bruce Lipton and biology of belief, and hearing the concepts that he says there, it was a big perspective shift for me, because it helped me articulate something that many of us sense intuitively as practitioners, but weren't always given the language for, which is genes are not the boss. Biochemistry is not running in isolation, and the environment a cell lives in influences how genes express. And that environment is shaped by signals. That can be chemical signals, hormone signals. It can also be neural signals. So that can be associated with the upbringing a person is living in or experienced. It can deal with the environment that you're living in right now, the relationships, the workplace. So many different things have a really big impact on how a person shows up and how their body responds to the challenges they're dealing with now. And so what a nervous system is perceiving, it's part of the environment every cell is responding to. So when we talk about belief, we're really talking about perception, how someone perceives themselves, how they perceive their body, how they perceive their future, and how they perceive threat and safety. And those perceptions are not just thoughts floating around, they translate into nervous system tone. Nervous system tone translates into chemistry, and chemistry influences immune signaling, inflammation, digestion, and repair. And that's biology. So belief isn't just woo. Belief is a shorthand way of describing the deeply ingrained perception patterns that shape physiology. And this connects back to psychology of disease. Because psychology of disease isn't saying you caused this. It's saying long-standing emotional patterns, identity patterns, and stress patterns shape how the body reacts. Over time, quietly, automatically, and below conscious awareness. Which is important because most of those patterns were not actually chosen. They were learned often early, often in response to real circumstances. Things like, as I've already mentioned, having to grow up fast, being the responsible one, being the peacemaker. What about learning that love came from being useful? Or learning that slowing down wasn't safe? Or learning that rest meant falling behind? These experiences shape a belief at a nervous system level, and it's not as sentences, not as affirmations, but as embodied expectations. And those expectations shape our physiology. So for many clients with MS or autoimmune, a common underlying belief pattern looks something like, I have to stay on guard. I can't fully relax. Maybe my body is unpredictable. Or I need to be ready for the next flare. Or I can't trust things to be stable. Even when those aren't consciously stated, the nervous system behaves as if they're true. And remember, the nervous system does not respond to logic. It responds to perceived reality. So even if someone consciously believes I'm doing everything right, Their subconscious expectation is something is wrong, or it's only a matter of time before things get worse. So there's a lot we can do to help clients from this perspective, because recognizing where things are showing up to try and keep you safe, the nervous system is not trying to do things just for fun. The unconscious mind, which we're going to talk about in a minute, excuse me, which we're going to talk about in a minute, its ultimate goal is always to protect us and to keep us safe. So when that internal environment, that biochemistry operates inside, it's not to make your job harder, but to make your work make more sense. So common patterns I see show up over and over again. As I mentioned, these are ones with autoimmune, with MS clients that I see over and over. So that's the high responsibility, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the always being the one that's relied on, and the always pushing through. These are often praise traits, and we call these people strong, reliable, high achieving. But physiologically, these patterns often come with long-term stress load, and ultimately, they can come with a cost. A nervous system that rarely fully powers down. And so this is not because it was chosen, but it's because at some point, this way of being helped them survive emotionally, socially, or practically. These patterns live in the nervous system, not just personality, and that distinction does matter. All right, so the two operating systems that I'm going to touch on briefly, and then I'm going to do an experience with you so you can feel how this makes a difference, or how you can feel this in your system. And so knowing this is really helpful, because then you can help clients start to experience these things as well. And so when we think of the two operating systems, we have our conscious mind, which relies on our senses to bring in information. So that's going to be what we see, what we hear, and what we feel. And so it takes in that information, and the conscious mind is where we set goals. It's the goal-setting mind. But then we also have this giant unconscious, subconscious mind. That's the goal-getter mind. This is the part of our mind that responds and creates meaning to these things that our senses are taking in. So the things that you see, feel, and hear at a young age, especially before the age of 8, when we don't have what's called the critical faculty that goes between our conscious and unconscious mind, that allows us to decide, do I want to accept this, or do I want to reject it? That's why many of us have these patterns that showed up at a very young age, and now we just continue to respond the same way over and over again, because we created that pattern back then, and the mind just continues to rely on that to move forward. So the conscious mind, as I said, is the goal setter. It chooses the meal plan. It understands why sugar spikes blood glucose. It understands why protein matters. This is the part of your client who says, I'm ready. It's also the part of you that went to nutrition school. Education lands here. And education is important, but it's not the whole picture. And so then the subconscious mind, when we talk about patterns of like MS and autoimmune conditions, we're not talking about conscious thoughts. We're not talking about affirmations. We're not talking about mindset in a way social media often frames it. We're talking about the automatic below awareness patterns that shape how safe a body feels when it's being in the world. These patterns often are formed long before someone develops symptoms, sometimes decades before. They form in response to lived experiences, family dynamics, early responsibility, emotional environments, chronic pressure, periods of instability, or simply growing up in a world that rewarded pushing and performing more than resting and listening. I like this metaphor here that helps to kind of connect the dots when I'm talking about conscious and subconscious or unconscious mind. The conscious mind is like the GPS. It knows where we want to go. It decides, but the subconscious mind is the driver, and that's the one that decides whether the car actually moves. You can have the best map in the world, but if the driver doesn't feel safe, the car doesn't go. This explains why education alone isn't enough. This also explains why adding more protocols doesn't always fix a plateau. Sometimes the driver needs more support before the route actually matters. All right, so let's feel this. I want to give you a short experience now so you can feel this more than just understand it, because this is where change actually happens. So this is not about theory, it's not about concept, this is about physiology. So if you're comfortable, I invite you to place both of your feet on the ground and just let your hands rest on your legs. And take a normal breath in. Nothing dramatic. Just notice what your body feels like right now. Not changing. Just noticing. Now I want you to imagine something very specific. Imagine you just received an email from a client. And it says, "I'm flaring again." Or "This isn't working." Or "I don't think this is helping." Or maybe "I'm getting worse." Just imagine reading those words. And just notice how that feels in your body. Does your jaw tighten? Do your shoulders lift? Does your breathing get a little more shallow? Just observe. Okay, move your body. Shake that off. I'm not going to leave you there. Don't worry. All right, so now I want you to imagine something different. Now imagine a client sending you an email that says, "I'm feeling more stable. My energy is better. I'm trusting my body more. Thank you." Just notice what's different in your body now. Is your breathing deeper? Is your chest softer? Is there more space? That difference you just felt may have been subtle, but if you noticed it, that is state. Nothing about your nutrition changed, nothing about your protocol changed, nothing about your knowledge changed, but your internal chemistry shifted. In the first scenario, your body subtly prepared for threat. In the second scenario, it allowed for regulation. That shift changes blood flow, hormone release, inflammatory signaling, digestive capacity, and even immune tone. And if that can happen in a matter of seconds, imagine what happens in a body that lives in one state for most of the day. Now bring it back to MS and autoimmune. If a client is living in the first state most of the time, anticipating flares, bracing for decline, scanning for symptoms, or trying to hold it all together, their immune system is receiving constant vigilant signals. if they can experience more of the second state, stability, support, predictability, and safety, that's a different immune message. And that's why state matters. And you just felt it. So a key takeaway that I hope you'll receive from today is that small shifts in state change internal environment. That's physiology, not mindset. And that makes a big impact when it comes to nutrition and how nutrition impacts the body. And so one client example that I wanted to share with you, and I have many, is I had one client come to me and she'd been living with MS for years. Her biggest struggles were fatigue and numbness. She'd tried multiple diet and supplement protocols, many things that she found on TikTok. Some had helped a little, nothing lasted. We strengthened her nutrition foundation. We simplified. We focused on nourishment, and at the same time, we worked with nervous system stress patterns. And within a few months, this woman was saying she was feeling more stable energy, consistent throughout the day. The numbness had completely subsided. Her energy or her sleep was better, and she hadn't had a flare-up in much longer than she usually did. She said, "I don't feel like I'm waiting for the next crash anymore." And so when you zoom out, the pattern is consistent. Same nutrition, better response. Same seed, healthier soil. It's not magic, it's environment. And reframes plateaus from something is wrong to something needs support. And that's very different posture. All right. So thank you for being here today. And I want to speak to you now as practitioners. You don't just give people food lists. You don't just calculate macros. You don't just suggest supplements. You influence the environment in which change happens. Your tone, your pacing, your presence, your curiosity, and your lack of judgment. All of that sends signals. Signals that say you're safe now. We can go slow. We'll figure this out. That matters more than we're taught. So when clients plateau, before assuming failure, before assuming that they're not compliant, and before assuming that they need more, pause and ask, is their body under-resourced? Is their system under constant pressure? And does change feel safe for them? Because sometimes the next step isn't adding. Sometimes it's stabilizing, simplifying, creating more safety. That's still nutrition care, just at a deeper level. Trying to think. I think we're almost done. Okay, so nutrition supplies the materials, still very important, but the nervous system creates the environment. Beliefs influence signal strength, and together they create resilience. Not perfection, not a straight line, resilience. The ability to respond, the ability to adapt, the ability to recover. And that's the goal. So I want to leave you with this today. If you were drawn to this work, if you're curious about this layer, it's probably because you're already noticing it with clients, and trust that. Nutrition is first, is priority all the time. And you can start seeing things as a whole system. Then nutrition works better. Bodies respond better, and practitioners feel less stuck too. So if you'd like to explore subconscious mind work a little bit further, I'd be happy to connect. And I do have a resource for you today as well. It's a simple little worksheet. It's a simple little guide that helps you kind of assess what's coming up with a client, ask some different questions, and reframing things is often helpful, because often I remember in my journey of being in that MS world of feeling like there was nothing I can do. And that little crack was all I needed to start looking at things different. That's what opened the door for nutrition. It's what opened the door for hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming and working on the different layers and deeper layers of things that have led to where I am now. I've been symptom-free for more than 10 years and not on medication. It's all done naturally. And so if you would like more information on that, for sure, connect with me. But if anyone has any questions, I'm available for that too. I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh my goodness, Kate. So inspiring. And, hearing a personal story and then bringing that all into your professional perspective, it's really very empowering. So thank you so much. Everyone, I don't know if you were so enthralled by Kate's pulling you into her story and her many, many nuggets of information. If you have questions and haven't yet put them in the Q&A box, please do so. And we'll go through and answer those. A special note I want to make that you said, and I didn't know what the name for this was, phrase traits. So common traits that people with autoimmune and MS have. You mentioned they have high responsibility, perfectionism, people pleasing, always pushing through. You mentioned, being rewarded for all of this. And that is a real reflection on our culture. And I'm sort of going through this myself and understanding all of this as well. It's hard to step away from something that you've been rewarded for in personal relationships, in your job, in your culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as a child, like I was the easy child because I took care of everyone else and I never needed anything. And I see that often with clients where they're like, oh, well, I have to take care of everyone else. And it's the expectation. And it's like, okay, well, eventually your system is like, yo, what about me? Right? So, yeah. And it's, as a society, very much we're rewarded for that, which is true.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any insight? I think your practice is really focused on women. And my understanding is that autoimmune presents way more in women than men. I've been reading a lot of Dr. Gabor Mate. Why do you think that is, men versus women?
From the responsibility side of things, there's a lot of that for sure. Actually, the interesting part is post 2020, I've had a lot more male MS clients coming my way, which is, it's putting other stress on the body, just what we all went through in the years since then, kind of thing. But yeah, it's a lot of the women are the kids that took care of everyone else. And so the holistic psychologist talks about that in some of her content as well, about the parentified child, and that is often women. There's also the hormone side of things too, right? So there's different beliefs as why it's often women that have MS, but it's like, I think it's multifactorial. I don't think it's just one thing, but yes, it's very interesting. And then, there's been more men recently too.
Okay. Thanks. Rylan has a question here. What does a general idea of working with you for MS look like? My dad has MS and I would like to connect him with yourself.
Wonderful. It all starts with a conversation, because sometimes we can be still in that place where it's like, there's nothing I can do. And so I'm like very easy when it comes to a conversation. It's like, do you want to chat about this? Is there a little change that you could start making for yourself today? I still do talk about nutrition, around this, because I think it's very important when it comes to anything, but definitely if the body is attacking something that doesn't belong there, and then your tissues are getting in the way, there's nutrition changes that need to happen. But that would be my first recommendation, is like, if you can connect us, that would be great. I do have like a podcast, and there's all kinds of other resources. I just wrote a book. So there's lots of different ways where he can dip his toes into like my world to see if it feels like a good fit for him.
Sure, your answer kind of mirrors your whole philosophy. You have to sort of start where somebody is and not go over capacity to move things along. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Another question. Well, actually, it's more of a comment. I'm surprised about the commonalities between MS and insulin resistance / fatty liver.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a comment back to that?
In what context?
Yeah, I don't have anything more. Is there a connection between MS and insulin resistance?
I mean, considering it's a female population, not entirely shocked there, but I haven't had that come up where it's like noticeable enough that I'm like, what's going on here? So.
Okay, so if this person wants to add anything more for context, we can revisit this topic. Okay, another one. This was truly very inspiring and beautiful, Kate. Thank you so much. Really resonated with me, and I learned incredibly so much valuable information. I would love to know more about how the nervous system can impact more in ways, and how we as practitioners can incorporate some of the nervous system strategies. And in this regards, do you teach a course or any tools that you have?
Yes, I don't teach a course. I'm like master practitioner level for NLP. So no, I don't teach courses on that. I run regular meetups where we learn lots of different things there. Yeah, that's kind of the nervous system. It's really cool when you start to recognize, like if we think about it, I don't tell my heart to beat every time it beats. No one does. We don't tell our stomach how to digest that meal that we had for lunch today. We don't tell our lungs to take a breath every time that we need air and oxygen. And all of that is controlled by your subconscious mind, unconscious mind. And it's like, okay, well, what if I can get the subconscious mind working with me to help me get to a place of better health and healing? What if the changes could happen on that layer? And how does that change? Like I often will say to people along the lines of, I have like dozens and dozens of people on all the social platforms saying, every day I'm getting healthier and healthier. And they repeat that to themselves over and over again. And the number of messages, DMs I get back with people who are like, it's weird, but this cool thing happened. And change starts to happen when you start to focus on different things. And so even just changing your focus is so powerful, because how often did I walk around thinking, I don't want more symptoms. I don't want more nerve pain. I don't want more numbness. And all of a sudden those things just amplified. The subconscious mind is always looking to give you evidence of what you're focusing on. So focus on what you want. And then it's really cool, the changes that start to happen.
Do you have a resource that you can direct people to for nervous system training? Or learning a bit more? I guess you said your podcast. Maybe we can, if you could put that in the chat, what the name of your podcast, that would be helpful.
Sure.
And you have a book coming out too.
I just published it.
Oh, Standing Somewhere New. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so important to sometimes zoom out and look at the big picture. As you said, reframe it, new perspective. More isn't more. Sometimes less is more, but you just have to think about things differently. All right, another question. If the client is in late stages, unable to walk or write, is it reversible or too late?
It's like, if we can get 1% better, I would do that. Like I would look for how can we help them kind of start to shift towards feeling a bit better. Because if they're in a state, like I was 29 years old and the doctor said to me, we need to have the wheelchair conversation. And I was just like, are you kidding me? So you can be like 1% in moving in the right direction could make a really big difference in terms of their quality of life, right? Can we get them out of a wheelchair? Maybe not. But it's like, if they can start to realize that they can take a little bit more personal power in terms of their own health and well-being, I think it's worth it. So
shifting the needle, maybe not talking about cure, maybe talking about function and quality. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
A comment it's fair to say that we may have a nervous system epidemic, considering how deep and interconnected all of this is. Okay. Another question. Does this holistic approach eventually eliminate the need for medications? For example, in rheumatoid arthritis?
I don't know if I can speak to that.
Yeah, I think within your scope of practice, how would you answer that?
That's a conversation with your doctor. Like, that's not something I can speak to. I don't take medication, but I never tell a client to come off their medication. It's like, let's work on the nervous system and get you to a point where maybe that conversation can happen with your doctor.
Okay, fair. Very, very well said. How could you participate in meetups for someone in Vancouver, British Columbia?
I host a meetup group, and it's virtual, so they're welcome to come to that.
Okay. How would they contact you then for that?
I can put that. What is the name of the meetup? I can put that in the the freebie that I'm going to send to you if you want. Or
that would be great. So just for those of you who missed it, you'll be getting a resource. IHN will collect Kate's information, and then we'll send that back out with the replay on the video. I have brought significant changes to my nutrition lately, and it was targeted towards insulin resistance. Oh, this is back to the insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. Listening to Kate, I got the feeling that many of the things she was referring to were relevant to my situation. This is what I meant by commonalities. So I'm not sure there's a question in there, but just a little clarification. And anything you want to add to that, Kate?
I mean, if you think about it, when there's, like, if there's a weak area in the body and then something happens, it's always going to go to the weak area, right? So if it's nervous system related, or if it's like someone who has Crohn's and colitis, so there's gut related stuff, or wherever the weakness is in the body, if the body's trying to keep you safe, it's going to end up in the area that's the most problematic, or that's the weakest for you. So I think everything is interconnected if you think about it. Like, all of the health conditions and the problems that people deal with, I think there's commonality in a lot of different ways there. And it's like, how can we look at the body and mind as like this interconnected play that works so well together, and figure out like what's actually going on, that these problems are showing up in general. So yeah, I would say they are interconnected. I think many things are, right? Yeah,
and we learned too as CNPs that every person is going to be looked at differently, and underlying factors will be different. That's our specialty. That's what we do, right? Mm-hmm. How would you explain all this to a 40-year-old male that within a year has been wheelchair bound and is now living in a hospital with tremors so bad he cannot feed himself? I'm sorry to hear this. He is frustrated because he cannot control what he eats or living situation.
I'd want to have a conversation with him to figure out, like, is there something that he can start doing for himself? What's one thing, one action that he can take for himself? Even along the lines of like shifting the perspective. What's the self-talk? What are the things that he's saying to himself every single day? Because we have more conversations with ourselves than we will with anyone else, right? And it's like focusing on how crappy things are. I did this when I was in my MS journey, and I focused on how crappy things were, and focusing on all the things we don't want. It's like, if you imagine you want to travel somewhere, and so you put into your GPS where you want to go or where you don't want to go. So often we're focusing on, I don't want symptoms, I don't want this, I don't want that. We're basically programming our GPS to take us where we don't want to go. And then we get frustrated and annoyed when we get there. And it's like, okay, so, I mean, he's someone who, okay, he can't physically take a lot of actions, but he can definitely change his thought process and what he's focusing on. So that would be the first step.
Yeah, and you can see from the description, he is feeling very disempowered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I have had Raynaud's since birth. How much do you feel this is influenced by the nervous system?
Since birth, I mean, what can we do to help shift it would be the question there. Because if it's since birth, it's not something that was, well, it depends, because it depends how open you are to this. But sometimes we inherit stuff. Sometimes there's past life stuff that comes up. I do a lot of timeline therapy with clients, and the whole perspective there is like going back to the initial sensitizing event. Sometimes it's a past life, and sometimes it's actually a previous generation. So there could be something that's under the surface.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about that right now too. Another question about nervous system training. Where did you do your training?
I did hypnosis and NLP training in Ottawa, Ontario.
Okay. Folks, I'm not sure if I've missed anything, but I think I went through the chat and as well as the Q&A. One last chance to put something else into the Q&A box. But so many comments, Kate, to say how much they like their talk. It has really resonated and hit with a lot of people.
Wonderful.
And as I said, we are sending this replay out. I know I'm going to be watching it again because, I'd be on one idea and then thinking about that. And I think I missed 2 or 3 that you were talking about after that. So that is wonderful. Okay. I do not see anything else. Is there any one last thing you want to say to us in closing?
I think the biggest message is trust yourself. If something feels like you don't really have all the answers, and really focusing on the mindset thing. I guess that's the message I would leave with you. And it's like when we focus on things, we can get so caught up in this narrow view of this is the way things are, and I just have to accept life the way it is. And as students at IHN or people who are practitioners who have studied at IHN, you do already have an opener mind than I did after diagnosis, and even 10 years after. I was so narrow-minded. And when I started to kind of open my awareness up, it's amazing the things that started to present themselves in my life. And so consider what you focus on, because your subconscious mind is always looking to prove evidence and give you evidence of what you're focusing on. So when you start focusing on more of what you want, it shows you evidence of that. So that would be kind of my biggest perspective. It made such a big difference for me to stop focusing on what I didn't want and start putting into my GPS where I did want to go. And then it's really cool what shows up. So, yeah.
Sure. Maybe we should all reread Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. I see one more question came in. Do you have a recommendation for best supplements for MS?
It's going to depend on the person. I mean, ultimately, definitely, I like cod liver oil, which some people don't like to hear, but it doesn't taste as bad as it used to. That's often one that I really like, but it's going to depend on what the person's body actually needs, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, fair. So I think that's pretty much it for today. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you enjoyed the talk as much as I do. Kate, it's been wonderful. I've enjoyed meeting you for the first time, and I'm going to look for your work now. And so I guess that concludes today's webinar. And have an enjoyable rest of your day, everybody, wherever you are, evening, afternoon, morning, and watch for another guest speaker coming up soon. Thanks everyone.